I'm going to read from our book that we're reading, which you can't really see because of the glare. Little House in the Big Woods. We were on page 34. We were two paragraphs down on 34. I'm just going to start and back up a little bit and read all of 34 if that doesn't bother you too much. I hope it doesn't. Okay, we're going to try to read up to the next chapter. Okay, all right, here we go. Pa would hang his gun on the wall over the door, throw off his fur cap and coat and mittens, and call, "Where's my little half pint of sweet cider half drunk up?" That was Laura because she was so small. Laura and Mary would run on his knees and sit there while he warmed himself, would run to climb on his knees and sit there while he warmed himself by the fire. Then he would put on his coat and cap and mittens again and go out to do the chores and bring in plenty of wood for the fire. Sometimes when Pa had walked his trap lines quickly because the traps were empty, or when he had got some game sooner than usual, he would come home early. Then we would have time to play with Laura and Mary. One game they loved to play was called Mad Dog. We played that game. I play that game with my dogs in the house, almost the same way as Pa plays Mad Dog with Laura and Mary. Pa would run his fingers through his thick brown hair, standing it all up on end. Then he dropped on all fours, and growling, he chased Laura and Mary all around the room, trying to get them cornered where they couldn't get away. They were quick at dodging and running, but once he caught them against the wood box behind the stove, they couldn't get past Pa, and there was no other way out. Then Pa growled so terribly, his hair was so wild and his eyes so fierce, that it all seemed real. Mary was so frightened that she could not move. But as Pa came nearer, Laura screamed, and with a wild leap and a scramble, she went over the wood box, dragging Mary with her. And at once there was no Mad Dog at all. There was only Pa standing there with his blue eyes shining, looking at Laura. "Well," he said to her, "you're only a little half pint of cider half drunk up, but by jinks, you're as strong as a little French horse." "You shouldn't frighten the children so, Charles," Ma said. "Look at how big their eyes are." Pa looked, and then he took down his fiddle. He began to play and sing. So this is a picture of Pa playing Mad Dog with them. Yankee Doodle went to town. He wore his striped trousies. Trousies are pants. Trousers are pants. He swore he couldn't see the town, there were so many houses. Laura and Mary forgot all about the Mad Dog, and there he saw some great big guns, big as a log of maple, and every time they turned him round, it took 2 yoke of cattle, and every time they fired him off, it took a horn of powder. It made a noise like father's gun, only a nation louder. Pa was keeping time with his foot. Grab 2 pages. Laura clapped her hands to the music when he sang, "And I'll sing Yankee Doodle Dee Doo, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle Dee Doo, and I'll sing Yankee Doodle." All alone in the wild big woods in the snow and the cold, the little log house was warm and snug and cozy. Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura and baby Carrie were comfortable and happy there, especially at night. Then the fire was shining on the hearth, and cold and the dark and the wild beasts were all shut out, and Jack the brindle bulldog and Black Susan the cat lay blinking at the flames in the fireplace. Ma sat in her rocking chair sewing by the light of the lamp on the table. The lamp was bright and shiny. There was salt in the bottom of its glass bowl with the kerosene to keep the kerosene from exploding, and there were bits of red flannel among the salt to make it pretty. It was pretty. Laura loved to look at the lamp with its glass chimney so clean and sparkling, its yellow flame burning so steadily, and its bowl of clear kerosene colored red by the bits of flannel. She loved to look at the fire in the fireplace. So at night it's the 1800s, so there's no TV, there's no telephones, nobody has cell phones to play games on. Nobody's listening to music except for the fiddle playing because none of those things have been invented yet. And so she's just enjoying watching the fire, kind of like we would enjoy watching TV. You guys have probably seen that. You can actually get a channel that has a log fire on your TV so that you can pretend you live in the 1800s and watch the logs burn. She loved to look at the fire in the fireplace, flickering and changing all the time, burning yellow and red and sometimes green above the logs and hovering blue over the golden and ruby coals. And then Pa told stories. When Laura and Mary begged him for a story, he would take them on his knees and tickle their faces with his long whiskers until they laughed aloud. His eyes were blue and merry. One night, Pa looked at Black Susan stretching herself before the fire and running her claws out and in, and he said, "Do you know that a panther is a cat, a great big wild cat?" "No," said Laura. "Well, it is," said Pa. "Just imagine Black Susan bigger than Jack and fiercer than Jack when he growls. Then she would be just like a panther." He settled Laura and Mary more comfortably on his knees, and he said, "I'll tell you about Grandpa and the Panther." This is a great story, by the way. There's lots of little stories within this story, and I love this one. It's very exciting. "Your grandpa?" Laura asked. "No, Laura, your grandpa, my father." "Oh," Laura said, and she wriggled closer against Pa's arm. She knew her grandpa. He lived far away in the big woods in a big log house. And Pa began, and this is what the panther looks like. We're going to read the story of Grandpa and the Panther. So back in I guess you would call it the northern Midwest of the United States, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. I read a book a long time ago that was really interesting that talked about how all of those states were completely covered with forest. Like in 1492, when Columbus came here, all of those states were forested. And then as people moved to America and non-native Americans, as settlers started to come, they started to chop down all the trees. But in the 1400s, and probably when Pa and Laura in the 1800s, there were lots of trees. And it was said that a panther or a squirrel or any animal that lived in a tree could jump all the way from, I don't know, like the edge of Pennsylvania all the way across to Ohio and not touch the ground. Like there were so many trees that animals could just hop from tree to tree to tree. And so this story, the panther is going to do that. It's going to be as fast for the panther to just jump from tree to tree as it is for the panther to run. The story of Grandpa and the Panther. Your grandpa went to town one day and was late starting home. Oh, you guys can probably hear the meowing of my panther. Eugene! Eugene! Come here! Yeah, both the dogs just came over, but the cat. Cat doesn't follow directions. I have a big, huge cat. He loves to eat, and so he likes to. You can kind of hear him. He stands in the middle of the house and meows for snacks. Your grandpa went to town one day and was late starting home. It was dark when he came riding his horse through the big woods, so dark that he could hardly see the road. And when he heard a panther scream, he was frightened, for he had no gun. "How does a panther scream?" Laura asked. "Like a woman," said Pa. "Like this." And then he screamed so that Laura and Mary shivered with terror. They don't meow. They make like this sound that sounds like a person screaming. It chills. Like if ever you've heard it, you guys could probably go to YouTube, and you're on your YouTube already. You could probably YouTube play the sound of a panther screaming, and it just chills your blood. It's terrifying because it sounds like somebody screaming, a person screaming. How does a panther scream? Laura asked. Like a woman, said Pa, like this. Then he screamed so that Laura and Mary shivered with terror. Ma jumped in her chair and said, Mercy, Charles. But Laura and Mary loved to be scared like that. The horse with Grandpa on him ran fast, for it was frightened too, but it could not get away from the panther. The panther followed through the dark woods. It was a hungry panther, and it came as fast as the horse could run. It screamed now on this side of the road, now on the other side, and it was always close behind. Grandpa leaned forward in the saddle. So this is what the picture looks like. So Grandpa's riding the horse as fast as he can, and the panther's following. Grandpa leaned forward in the saddle and urged the horse to run faster. The horse was running as fast as it could possibly run, and still the panther screamed close behind. Then Grandpa caught a glimpse of it as it leapt from treetop to treetop almost overhead. It was a huge black panther leaping through the air like Black Susan leaping on a mouse. It was many, many times bigger than Black Susan. It was so big that if it leaped on Grandpa, it would kill him with its enormous slashing claws and its long, sharp teeth. Grandpa on his horse was running away from it just as a mouse runs from a cat. The panther did not scream anymore. That's because it's like ready to kill him. Grandpa did not see it anymore, but he knew that it was coming, leaping after him in the dark woods behind him. The horse ran with all its might. At last, the horse ran up to Grandpa's house. Grandpa saw the panther springing. Grandpa jumped off the horse against the door. He burst through the door and slammed it behind him. Now, unfortunately, he's left the poor horse out there with the panther. He burst through the door and slammed it behind him. The panther landed on the horse's back just where Grandpa had been. The horse screamed terribly and ran. He was running away into the big woods with the panther riding on his back and ripping his back with its claws. But Grandpa grabbed his gun from the wall and got to the window just in time to shoot the panther dead. That's good because the horse, that's terrible. Grandpa said he would never again go into the big woods without his gun. When Pa told this story, Laura and Mary shivered and snuggled closer to him. They were safe and snug on his knees, with his strong arms around them. They liked to be there before the warm fire, with Black Susan purring on the hearth and good dog Jack stretched out beside her. When they heard a wolf howl, Jack's head lifted and the hairs rose stiff along his back. But Laura and Mary listened to that lonely sound in the dark and the cold of the big woods, and they were not afraid. They were cozy and comfortable in their little house made of logs, with the snow drifted around it and the wind crying because it could not get in by the fire. And we will stop right there. The next chapter is chapter 3. It's called The Long Rifle. All right, so we'll start in, this has really long chapters, and so we will, like the chapters are, they're pretty long. So we will just read little bits, little chunks. All right, so we will see you for the next time when we read The Long Rifle. We'll talk a little bit about guns too. All right. See you later, alligator.